Welcome to the road to $1 million US. Let's get right into the Bitcoin chart for today. Starting on the 1 day time frame for Bitcoin, and then as this video moves on, I'm going to head into lower and lower time frames. First of all, we should check back in with this bullish divergence that we saw confirm at about 78,000. Typically, a bullish divergence points towards us getting a break from all of this bearish price action that we have been seeing here recently, either in the form of some choppy sideways price action or potentially some bullish momentum on the 1 day time frame. So far, we have seen this bullish divergence play out for about 2 weeks, and I do think there is some time left for this bullish divergence to continue playing out. Now, in terms of invalidation, it would either be if we actually break down below this descending trend line in the Bitcoin price, or if we actually break down below this ascending trend line in the RSI momentum indicator. And you can see that we are actually pretty close to invalidating this bullish divergence. So that is definitely something to be looking out for in this upcoming week. Besides that, we also have this descending trend line in the RSI momentum indicator, which is also still breaking out to the upside. And even though the price hasn't broken out above this downtrend, the RSI has already broken out here. So this could be that early signal that next week we are going to get a move higher in the Bitcoin price, potentially even breaking out above that level of resistance. The key thing I am looking out for on this daily time frame is if the RSI is holding above this descending trend line. Of course, if we were to break back down below this, also invalidate this bullish divergence, then at that point we should be expecting more downside for Bitcoin to be coming after that. But guys, so long as we are holding above this, my outlook for Bitcoin remains the same, which is that I think it is more likely that we are getting a move to the upside, potentially even reaching into overbought territory once again at some point. Now, the reason I think this is because we have seen RSI breakouts like this happen many times on the channel before. For example, we saw this on the 1 week time frame as well. At the time in 2024, we were looking at this descending trend line for a very long time. But then when we actually broke it, that turned out to also be the week where Bitcoin bottomed at around 50,000. And of course, we saw a massive move to the upside after that. Therefore, for now, this base case of mine continues to play out as expected. Moving on to the 4-hour time frame, Bitcoin continues to trade in this ascending channel pattern. The key level of support to be looking out for this ascending channel pattern is 83.2K in the Bitcoin price, and in terms of resistance, that is sitting at around 89.2K. One thing you may notice here though is that we actually broke out above this previous level of resistance, and we got the 4-hour candle close above as well, really confirming that this is indeed broken at this point. And right now with this current 4-hour candle, we are potentially flipping this 84.8K level into a level of support. Now, of course, at this point, we are talking about the immediate short term here. But if we get a candle close above that 84.8K level, that could start to look something like a break above, a retest, and then possible resumption from there. So that is something that I'm looking out for here early on Monday. Besides that, on the 2-hour time frame, we were in this downtrend recently. However, since then, we have broken this and seen some choppy sideways price action over the weekend. And now on Sunday, we did get a bit of a move to the upside. However, we were mostly chopping sideways here. As we are heading into this new week of trading, likely we are going to see momentum return to the market, as well as the volume increasing once again. And then lastly, before I dive into some deeper technical analysis for Bitcoin, let's just take a quick look at this 30-minute time frame here, because currently this is in an uptrend, basically trading right along this ascending trend line. And therefore, so long as we are holding above this, Bitcoin is simply just trending up over time. If you're looking for a short-term trade, potentially you could be keeping an eye on this ascending trend line, because breaking below that, of course, would likely lead to some short-term downside from there. Not financial advice, of course, but I'm simply telling you what I'm seeing in the charts, and you can do with that information what you like. All right, before we move on to the Bitcoin liquidation heat map, let's take a quick look at the CME gaps for Bitcoin, because we have a bit of an interesting situation going on here. So we filled this massive CME gap that we had all the way down at around 77K. But since then, we have created a bunch of weird little gaps here. Of course, on Thursday, we filled the CME gap to the upside and reversed from there, meaning that we currently have this CME gap here sitting at around 82,000, as well as another CME gap sitting at around 79.5k in the Bitcoin price. And then lastly, we do also have this massive gap to the upside sitting all the way at 95k. Potentially in the short term, we could see a filling of this CME gap. But like I said in my analysis as well, guys, currently, Bitcoin is trending up over time. And for example, filling that CME gap would mean that we are breaking down below this critical level of support. So it would start to look pretty bearish at that point, potentially even filling the CME gap to the downside at that 79k level, roughly speaking. But coming back to the CME gaps, like I said, currently we are in an uptrend. And yes, on this daily time frame as well, I am still just bullish on Bitcoin, even with us being in this broader downtrend, simply because we have that bullish divergence in the chart, as well as the breakout from the descending trend line in the RSI. Therefore, I would not be surprised if sometime soon we actually fill this CME gap at around 95k. Keep in mind that, of course, if we invalidate the bullish divergence, we break down below the RSI trend line, yes, then probably in the short term, we can just forget about this altogether. But until then, guys, be open to the possibility of this 95k gap being filled at some point. Next, moving on to the Bitcoin liquidation heat map. First of all, on this 1 week time frame, currently we have some liquidity to the upside as well as to the downside, which is quite typical for Bitcoin when we have basically just been trading sideways. Earlier today, we actually took out all of this liquidity here, sitting at around 85.1k. And yes, there is some liquidity to the upside left, sitting around 86,000. However, there's also a bunch of liquidity to the downside as well, because we have liquidity at 84.1k and even more liquidity sitting at 83,000. And the reason I'm sharing all of this with you is because it is important to take note of the fact that we do have liquidity to the downside. So if you start seeing some critical levels of support being lost, then potentially Bitcoin could just be targeting this pocket of liquidity. Something that is quite interesting though is if we zoom out all the way to the 1 year time frame for this Bitcoin liquidation heat map, because yes, there is liquidity, for example, at around this 82.7k level. Yes, there is liquidity at around this 80,000 US dollar level. But something that you may notice here is that over time, this pocket of liquidity at around 100k is becoming bigger and bigger, where currently we have close to $30 billion worth of short liquidations that would occur if Bitcoin price reaches this 100k level. And there's even massive liquidity all the way as high as 107,000. At the same time, we should not forget about this big liquidity of about $20 billion sitting at 75k. But currently we are in this short-term uptrend, of course, while being in a massive downtrend, don't get me wrong. But right now, if I'm just looking over the last week or so, we are basically just in an uptrend, and therefore we should also be looking towards this liquidity to the upside until we are losing critical levels of support. Lastly, before I close off today, guys, if you are new to the channel here and you have not checked out my free trading course, I highly recommend it, because this is over an hour of educational content specifically about the basics of technical analysis as well as just leverage trading in general. And you can watch this entire course for free on rt1m.com. So you can simply go to the website rt1m.com, or simply just go to the link in the video description where you will see the link to my free trading course as well. But regardless, if you do end up checking out the free course or not, thank you for watching once again, and I will see you tomorrow in the next one.